This interview was just a kind of masterclass in journalism by Norway Broadcasting Corporation's Yama Wolasmal. Over the weekend, this interview was published in Norway. He speaks here with Israeli spokesperson David Menser. He's not an IDF spokesperson, but he is an Israeli spokesperson. And he questions him here, relentlessly about Israel attacking hospitals in Gaza and claiming that they were Hamas command centers. And he just asked him why they haven't shown any proof. And this guy kind of has a temper tantrum.
Terrible crimes.
1 week into the war, your army spokesperson Daniel Hagari showed the world a virtual 3D model of an alleged Hamas command and control center, which stretched several stories beneath the largest medical facility in Gaza, the Shifa hospital, which you know very well of. Why haven't you shown any proof of such a command center?
Again, Yama, this line of questioning really shocks us here in Israel, because we've shown the world media, many journalists have been taken to those tunnels. We've seen those bulletproof doors. We've seen the cells, terror dungeon.
Specifically with Shifa Hospital, what you've shown the world are abandoned tunnels and shafts and weapons your forces claim were found inside the hospital. That does not prove that Hamas had a 3-story underground command and control center under the Shifa, a claim Israel has used to justify the attacks on hospitals all over the Gaza Strip.
I'm quite disappointed at this line of questioning, and it's not just from you, because we face this unreasonable burden of proof of the horrors of Hamas strategies. We've shown you tunnels.
Hamas has never denied they had tunnels under Gaza. That's an open secret. But you're claiming that they had a command center under the biggest hospital in Gaza. You use that as an argument to lay that hospital in ruins, and that's why it's a question the international press has to ask you. Where is this command center under the Shifa hospital?
Asking questions is, of course, the right thing to do for any journalist, but we have produced evidence of terror tunnels underneath the hospital. I apologize, Yama, if it's not enough for you. I apologize for the fact that we found RPGs in an intensive care unit. I apologize for the fact that we were fired on from the maternity ward. And I can tell you one thing, it wasn't the midwives that were firing at us. The evidence is clearly there. Journalists have been taken there. There is a terror tunnel network twice the size of the London Underground.
You've said it time and again, you find the line of questioning regarding the attacks on the hospitals and questioning these tunnels offensive.
I don't find it offensive, I find it ridiculous, to be ridiculous. You know, for an intelligent person like you, Yama, it's ridiculous. What else do you need to see? You've seen videos. Listen, Hamas admit it, we're fired from there, the terrorists are there, we kill 200 there, the doctors, we move the doctors and the patients out of the way. You know, I don't know, it's a ridiculous line of questioning. I'm not shocked by it, I find it ridiculous.
But why don't you open Gaza for international press who can freely move around and check these tunnels for themselves? Because what you've done until now in this war, you've sealed the borders. No journalists, independent journalists, are allowed in to Gaza by your forces and by Egypt. The journalists you're talking about who are allowed in are handpicked by the IDF. They go on so-called embeds, where the IDF forces decide where they go, where they move, where they film, and who they talk to. That's hardly the standard of free press.
So Yama, we have taken in many journalists, critical journalists, critical journalists as well. We have taken in many journalists on the point.
Guided tours, right. Mr. Menser, that's different. That's not how free press should operate. We should have the ability, the possibility to move around freely, to check and verify things for ourselves. That's our job, especially in a war. So you're not allowing us to do our job.
Yama, you've put this accusation to me. Let me give you Israeli government response.
It's not an accusation, it's a fact. You do not allow independent journalists access to the Gaza Strip.
You've put these points to me. Allow me to reply. Number one, This is a war zone, an active war zone, not a normal war zone, not like in other countries in the past. This is perhaps...
Pause it 1 second. Just as you think about this, a couple of things. One, we know that the Israelis were aware of the tunnel system under the Al-Shifa hospital because they built it
Yes.
in the 80s. A. B, the idea that this guy's about to say, this is an active war zone. We want to protect journalists. They have killed, is it now 110 journalists in Gaza? Targeted.
Not to mention their families.
Targeted. And families. Targeted.
Well, yeah, I mean, they do get into that a little bit later if we want to go for longer, but when he says we move the doctors and patients out of the way, that is also a massive lie. First of all, he never addressed the 3D model at the beginning of the Hamas command center. There are tunnels, that was known, and that was all that was ever kind of displayed. There are bodies being uncovered in scrubs with their hands tied behind their backs in these mass graves, meaning it's clear that these doctors or hospital workers have been assassinated. So they're not being protected or moved out of the way. They were, in many instances in these mass graves, summarily executed. There is also testimony from medical workers in Gaza who say that if they are going to leave the hospital, they change out of their scrubs because they feel that having scrubs on means it's a target on their back by the IDF. So none of that stuff is true, and he's heavy breathing and uncomfortable because he has to address it.
Fight things for ourselves. That's our job, especially in a war.
So
you're not allowing us to do our job.
Yama, you've put this accusation to me. Let me give you Israeli government response.
It's not an accusation, it's a fact. You do not allow independent journalists access to the Gaza Strip.
You've put these points to me. Allow me to reply. Number one, this is a war zone, an active war zone, not a normal war zone, not like in other countries in the past. This is perhaps an unprecedented war zone in human history.
True.
Where
so is Ukraine and Russia,
where they
journalists are allowed all the way
Hamas,
to the front
allow
line.
me to reply. You've asked me a question. Please do me the courtesy of allowing me to reply. So it's an active war zone. We have hostages in that. In Gaza. We know there are still 133 of our people, unfortunately 36 of them have been killed. We know that our hostages are there as well. We fear for their presence as well. And we know that our armed forces would be jeopardized. They would be jeopardized, and we will always put the lives of our armed forces ahead of any sort of journalists wanting to go in.
Yeah. Yep. Later on, he talks about how when he's confronted about the IDF killing journalists, he says that they had to kill Al Jazeera chief's children because they were Hamas. When having to acknowledge the idea, they were adult children, I should say, his kids. But that was part of what he claims there, because he's confronted by the fact that, like, you're saying that you want to protect journalists and that's why you're not letting any journalists in. But you have killed over 100 journalists, and not just Palestinian journalists. We know early on a Reuters media worker and journalist was targeted. So I just found that to be, like, as we play clips that we can kind of piece together that isn't being highlighted at all in the mainstream press here in the West, including like former hostage negotiators for Israel basically saying Hamas has said they will release the hostages. It's Israel that's holding up these negotiations. And we're like, that is a refreshing display of actually not letting that guy off the hook. So great job.